Today, I'm joined by the usual suspects, Bob Meatbag, Flavia, Decru, and Sam. So, hello? Hello, everyone.
Hey. Hi.
All right. So, last time we talked about some stuff that I just have to clarify, that I was talking about how you could sort of like psychoanalyze stuff with art. And I thought, like, hey, this is a pretty good idea. This is pretty interesting, kind of deal with psychoanalysis and art. And then it was brought to my attention that actually that can be bad. Like, you don't want to really psychoanalyze people on the spot in a stream. So I decided, okay, let's not do that. But what I did want to ask you guys in chat who are live right now, what are your goals in art? Why are you doing art? What motivates you? And then I figure it might be nice to get an understanding of, just like different people's reasons for doing art. And then sort of dealing with, okay, well, what are some of the hurdles that we could overcome? So, yeah. Meanwhile, I guess, I already started drawing. Yes, I will draw too.
I don't know what a boat looks like.
Oh my god, I use reference.
It's a marmot boat.
It's a great book.
It looks like the marmot fused with the boat, and it's like half marmot, half boat.
Yeah, that's
And
what
it also looks like a mermaid at the same time.
Yeah, mermaid.
Merma boat.
Mermaid boat.
Okay, I asked, or responded, with saying, I just enjoy drawing, and I have fun getting better, and I think it would be cool to impress people with it one day. Okay. Impress people, hey? I guess that's why a lot of people might get into a hobby, I suppose. New says, I draw to make people feel something. That's cool. Steely Bob says, after being depressed and not enjoying things, I got back into art to start doing something I like again. Okay. Gaggy says, what motivates me is evolution of consciousness, connection between people, and also people and other beings. I'm actually an architect, and my goal is to create fantasy worlds. That's very interesting. And Drew says, I get an image in my head, and I get terrified that someone will draw it before I can, and that fear gets me out of bed. It's interesting how many of the responses involve other people. Like, they're not intrinsic reasons for doing art, but they're sort of extrinsic. Like, I'm doing this so, impress other people, or to convey this or that to other people, which I think is fine with the message. Yevson, I draw because I have nothing else to do. I draw to have a story. Oh, they're going too fast. Okay. Let's see.
Wow.
I draw, hey, it's ya boy, says, I draw to have a story and character form, scars, expression, colors, everything. Okay, so you like telling stories. Okay. Meow says, I'd like to draw all the stupid short stories I daydream about during the day. Feel like I'm lacking technically. I wonder, Meow, are you actually doing that though? Like, because you say you want to, but that sounds like a pretty easy goal. Like, to draw the short stories. It's just a matter of like, okay, is it as good as you wanted it to be, maybe? And maybe it's not, but that's still fine. It's a good place to start from. So I would encourage you to draw your short stories. Don't worry about lacking technically, because technical things happen after. Like, you get good technically by doing it a lot. It's crazy how much in art, the knowledge you gain is like little trial and error accidents. So you'll be like drawing something and then you notice, oh, so for instance, for me, one of the things I noticed when I was drawing a lot of faces is I would have like, I'd get the eye placement down, the nose and stuff, and the mouth. And that's pretty talked about. Like, we often, in terms of guidelines, that's kind of understood, how to do these features, where they go. But what I would be confused about was when you get the chin and you get the jaw, where do you have that change of direction in the jaw? And then I started noticing it's kind of opposite the mouth in a way, like if you went around the mouth. And that made sense because, like, yeah, the jaw has to open and close. So then I figured that out. But that wasn't because I went to school or anything. It was just kind of noticing a pattern because you do it so many times. And that's why I say to people, you got to enjoy it and you've got to do the thing. Because if I was thinking like, I'm not good enough to draw faces, I'm not even going to try yet. Like, I have to learn how to do other things first. I wouldn't have been making the attempts that I would have noticed a pattern. There wouldn't have been enough information to draw a pattern from. And then on the other side, if I was, let's see, what was the other side? So the first side is that if I don't try, if I'm not enjoying it, I'm not going to be doing attempts to begin with. So you want to do a lot of things. Okay, but how do you do a lot of things? Well, if you like what you're doing, you're more likely to do it just for fun. So you're more likely to continue. And so much of art, it seems, is just this, like figuring stuff out as you go because you're doing the thing a lot. And so I really try to encourage people to do things a lot. And the best way to encourage that is to get them to do things they enjoy, because the chances of them doing things a lot will increase. Once you do things a lot, you have a lot of opportunities for trial and error. If you have a lot of opportunities for trial and error, you have opportunities to see patterns and also make mistakes and fix the mistakes and have different approaches. And that's really where it comes, what it comes down to. And that's why I keep harping on about the same few subjects. Like, you should find something you're passionate about. You should enjoy it. And then people will ask me, well, what fundamental should I learn? And it's like, no, do something you're passionate about. But it's because of this. Because if I say, hey, you should learn how to draw boxes. Okay, maybe you'll start drawing boxes, but first of all, how long are you going to keep drawing boxes? How many trials are you going to make? Are you noticing patterns? If it's not something you want to do and you're not really involved in it, there's less chance that you'll notice patterns. But the other thing is that you might get addicted to drawing something simple. And so you'll draw boxes because you just got used to drawing boxes. And maybe you initially did it so you could draw heads or something. But then you're just like kind of afraid after a while because it's like, well, I know how to draw boxes. That's my comfort zone. Let me just draw boxes. And sometimes this happens, or it happens a lot of times to artists who, let's say they want to be illustrators. And so they draw from reference because it's, I'm doing a study of this thing from reference. But then they get good at drawing from reference and that becomes their comfort zone. Like, step one, find a photo to draw from. And then continue from there. So then it can actually hinder your progress because you just stay in your comfort zone as opposed to what you initially said you wanted to do to begin with. So let's see what other reasons. Just Special BK says, I like to draw with other people. Like right now, it helps not to be too moody in school or just help me pass time. Yeah, that's also a good reason. I think a lot of people relate to that. The Overloader says, I want to eventually tell the very big story I have in mind for years. Cool. Again, try starting it. So you might think, well, I'm not good enough yet. But when I say start your project, I don't mean post your project. I don't mean like post it on Twitter or Instagram and show everybody your incomplete story or your story that you don't feel is good. I think we've gotten too used to this idea that creating means posting. So if I say start your story, it could be that you start your story now, like your comic now, and it takes you 6 years before anyone else sees that. But during that 6 years, you learned about storytelling, making the comic, getting better, really understanding all the things you want to know, as opposed to you say you're not good enough, you work on fundamentals for 6 years, you have no comic, but maybe you posted a lot of studies, you got used to doing studies, you did a lot of figure studies because people said, if you want to make a comic, you better learn how to draw the figure, and the best way to do that is through a lot of figure studies. And so you got used to posting figure studies, you got used to posting other kinds of studies, and because you're posting it, you build an audience and people sort of have an expectation. And then because you do what you're good at, you actually get good at that, let's say. So you start to have a strong following, let's say for your figure drawings, which are getting better and better because you're doing them more. But you've got a huge deficit in storytelling. So if someone said, hey, can you make an interesting story using your figures? You're like, well, no, but if you give me a picture of a figure, I can draw them and get the gesture right, which is kind of what happened to me. It's like, okay, so you've gotten good at this thing, but there are a bunch of things you haven't gotten good at that would be essential for making a story. Storytelling, knowing how to work with character motivations, simple things like layout, panel layout, word balloon placement, how do you create good flow in a story. Like I've seen certain artists who are really good illustrators, and then they try and make a comic, and it's like, yeah, the pictures individually are very well done. Like, yeah, you have a grasp of values, and you can paint this and make every panel painted. But I've seen where the word balloon placement is so bad, it's basically unreadable. Like, you can't follow the story. It's like, wait, who says what when? Is like they'll have a panel and maybe like 3 panels, let's say, and they'll have a word balloon that's like here from a character that's here, and then a word balloon here for a character that's here, and maybe this character says something. So as you read it, kind of off the page, let me move that slightly. Just go here, so we're kind of in the center. Okay. As I read it, I read this word balloon, then I read this one, then I read this one. The problem is, how I was supposed to read it is this was number 1, this was number 2, because it's part of this panel, and this was number 3. So that's bad word balloon placement, right? It's like, wow, you're really good at this, could be super pretty, but you didn't get this basic thing down that if you were just drawing crappy comics with stick figures, you would have figured that out, like proper word balloon placement. Because someone would have just, or you would have read your story and been like, this is confusing. I should do it this way. I should make it so this word balloon is, this is 2 and this is 3, right? So that's why I say it's very important to make comics if you want to make comics, because there's so many little things that you won't consider until you start making it. You'll consider other things, or you might ask people, especially if you ask like a friend who's better in art, let's say they've got more experience, they've been doing it longer, but they're doing illustrations, they're not going to be able to help you with the comic stuff. They might help you with certain things, but so much of comics is like doing comics. Like how, okay, let's say there's a ball and I want that ball to be thrown, right? So let's say I'm just drawing a ball. There's a panel, and this ball is being thrown. Okay, so to an illustrator, they will do like, okay, so the person's throwing the ball from here, like from this direction. They might look at that ball and be like, okay, let's get the core shadow. And the lighting's coming this way. You're going to get some reflected light. Trying to do this with a inking brush because I'm limited. But anyway, it's not working out so well. But let's say that, right? So here, I've drawn a ball. This is the illustrator's way of thinking about a ball. But the comic artist is going to think something like, okay, so there's this ball and it's in motion. So first thing, we'll need like speed lines. And then maybe even the lines of the ball are broken and they're kind of more using like dashes which are going with the speed lines because it just looks like the outline of the ball then is blurry because it's moving so fast. So now with this ball, it looks like a ball in motion, which for comics is good. That's what you want. Whereas this one is just illustrator ball. Maybe the illustrator would say, well, there's going to be a cast shadow because this is being thrown, and the cast shadow indicates that the ball is levitating. But there's no feeling of movement. There's nothing about, so for comics, this would be bad, like not good. So what are the fundamentals? Maybe you'd look at this and you say, there's no fundamentals because there's no cast shadow, there's no core shadow. It's like, there doesn't have to be. And if I was doing a core shadow, I would do it like this, where the core shadow actually follows the speed lines a bit. So it feels like it's in motion. Maybe have more cast lines just to indicate this moving. But again, it's a big difference between this. Oh, and then maybe there's like a sound effect as well, like, oh, not an S, maybe like a whoosh. Whoosh. So think about how many of these things that I did in this basic ball are in your traditional fundamentals that an illustrator would tell you. Proportion, perspective, anatomy, value, edges, I guess edges. Sure, we have edges, but they didn't tell you about sound effects, speed lines, conveying motion. All these things are important. These would be fundamentals for a comic artist, but they're not fundamentals for an illustrator. So this is why it's very important to learn what you want to do and to do that thing, because whatever your discipline is, there's like worlds within worlds. So when you find that discipline, you will find they have their own specific fundamentals. They have their own kind of things to pay attention to, their own disciplines within disciplines. Okay. Khalil says, I saw an artist I like with a really impressive simple style, and I thought I could do that, but then I learned. Yeah, simple is the hardest, because the most matters. So with complicated stuff, you can kind of hide how much you don't know. Like if I draw a bunch of lines, let's say, I'm drawing a character, and I draw a bunch of sketchy lines for, let's say it's just an arm, right? Something like that. There's like a shoulder, an arm. Okay, if I draw a bunch of sketchy lines, your eye will look at this and it will interpret any of these, like it'll look for the correct line and it'll like stick onto that. But if you had to draw it specifically with a very clean line, you don't, like maybe this is wrong because it was supposed to be this line. It's kind of like you look at this and it's like, well, I picked this line, but my eye was comfortable seeing this line. That's why inking can often look so much worse, because it's so dependent on finding the exact right thing. And so if you do minimalism, it's much more difficult. Like with Sam right now, you can see when he's painting the face that basically it's like a hard round brush. There's not a whole lot of blending. And so it's much more difficult to get specifically the right value for that spot, as opposed to an average, like there's a lot of gradients, there's a lot of like value shifts, everything's kind of being blurred. So I'm personally a big fan of minimalism as well, but it's very hard. Okay. Maya says, what motivates me is finding ways of using objects and colors to convey deeper messages. What kind of messages? Jay says, I picked it up and realized I was really bad at it and it bothered me, so I kept at it daily, 6 years now. Okay, so that's like you're doing it so you can be good, I guess. Noctalon's Campfire says, my goals are to become an indie game dev as well as independent artist. My short-term goal is to get better with 2D art and get better with Unreal Engine 5. Cool. All right. Feels embarrassing to, IAS says, it feels embarrassing to say, but yeah, I won't deny I want people to think my art is cool, that I'm good at making it. Yeah, I think most of us have some of this in our motivation. I know for myself, it was like when I was younger, it was younger than even like 2 years ago. It was stronger. This desire for impressing people and stuff. I think it's fine, but eventually it runs out. Like, you really ought to have part of it that's for yourself more than just for others. But yeah, it definitely does help. It can motivate, I should say that. But I don't think you should be embarrassed to say stuff. I think I've been thinking a lot about embarrassment and shame, and how a lot of times we don't share things because we're ashamed, but we're ashamed because people don't share those things. Like, if you did share the things, you wouldn't be ashamed anymore, because it would be normal. It would just be normalized. Like, okay, this is just a thing everyone goes through. And then we could talk about it. And if you have that issue, it would be something where people have talked about it enough to maybe be able to help you with that. Whereas if we never say the things we consider shameful or embarrassing, then we don't even know if this is like a really common thing and everyone suffers, or it's very common to suffer from this. And so it just heightens this feeling of like, oh, it's just me. And so it becomes more shameful, more embarrassing, right? So I think it's very good that we are open, even at the risk of kind of exposing ourselves to some degree of shame, one could say. Definitely, at least here, it's a safe place, so you won't get judged by me for having motives. I think it's better that we talk about them than that we hide them. So even if it's like, I'm just doing art to make money and be famous, like I just want to be rich and famous, I still think that's good to talk about, like, honestly, because that's fair. It's like, okay, you want to do art because you want to be rich and famous. I guess then you would talk about, is art a good way of becoming rich and famous? Like, just because some people did achieve that, how likely is it? What methods did they use? Maybe they did a lot of business stuff. And then it's like, okay, do you want to do business stuff? Do you want to do marketing? And then if the answer is no, I just want to draw, then the chances of being rich and famous go way down. Especially if you're very specific about what you want to draw. And if what you want to draw isn't necessarily mainstream, then it can be something that makes it harder to achieve that goal. Khalil says, I want to reach a level where I know what I make is objectively appealing. Again, this is extrinsic. So you want to reach a level where what you make is objectively appealing. So appealing to other people. But there is no such thing as objective appeal. There is only subjective appeal, because what you may find appealing, someone else may not find appealing, and so there is like a general consensus of most people find this appealing, but even then it doesn't make it objectively appealing, it just makes it collectively, subjectively appealing. You just have a larger amount of people who happen to subjectively think it's appealing. Because appeal has a lot to do with psychology and culture. It has a lot to do with, like, for instance, we find faces that are symmetrical as a whole. We find faces that are symmetrical to be more attractive because it's a sign of health. Like, if you have, I forget what it's called, when there's like a certain bilateral symmetry, is that it? Where,
Yeah.
like, both sides are symmetrical. So if both sides of you are symmetrical, it tends to mean you're healthy. And so we tend to find that attractive. However, if you have a lot of asymmetry in your character, we find that appealing because it's interesting. So in both cases, either you're symmetrical and you're boring but attractive, or you're not symmetrical and you're ugly but interesting. But a person who appreciates just attractiveness more might say this is more appealing to be symmetrical. And someone who appreciates interesting things more might say this is more appealing because it's not boring. So even in that, there is no universal appeal. And so trying to aim for that, like, I just want to make appealing shapes. Like when I hear people talk about these broad subjects of, oh, you should learn to make appealing shapes. It's like, to a certain degree, and it means certain things, and a shape in and of itself is not necessarily appealing outside of context. So there's usually a reason why shapes are appealing. So for instance, you can make more interesting shapes, and interest usually comes from things like variation. So if I make a shape like this, there's not a lot of variation. I tried to draw an equilateral triangle. Forgive me if it's not perfectly equal. But there's not a lot of variation. You know, all these angles are kind of the same. Okay, now if I made it, what is this, isosceles? It's more interesting because, like, these two are equal, but this one is a different angle. Or it's a different, whatever. No, the shape. I guess this is a different angle, yeah. But then if I make it like this, that's more interesting because now they're all different. You can't just flip them. They're not, like, symmetrical. Then if I make it like this, that's even more interesting because now I have the line itself has a lot going on. So the eye is going to have more interest in looking at this. But that doesn't mean that this is a worse shape than this. That just means it has a certain degree of interest inherent in it because of complexity, but maybe for the purpose I'm going for, this is actually the best shape, making it, in my mind, the most appealing shape, or at least for that job. But that doesn't make it like it's contextual, right? So when we talk about concepts like appealing shapes or fundamentals, it's kind of like what I was saying with the ball, like a thrown ball versus a properly rendered sphere. What is your purpose? If your purpose is, I want this ball to feel like it's moving quickly, then properly rendering it will actually get in the way. So it's really important when you listen to people talk to understand where they're coming from, what the context is. And so many times we don't get this context. It's just we get the end result. So maybe someone is a professional illustrator, let's say, and they've been working in the industry since the 1980s. Okay. So what they could say is like, I have 40 years of experience working in the industry. And to us, that, like maybe to people starting out, that sounds really impressive. Like you have 40 years of experience. You know your stuff. But what it also means is the world that this person entered into when they got into illustration was the 1980s. It could be completely different now. You know, different trends, different ways of getting in the industry. And so everything they say is not necessarily relevant to you, even though they've got a lot of numbers, like 40 years of experience, and definitely they would know a lot of things. It doesn't mean that the things they know are directly applicable to you starting out just now in this environment. So that's really important when you hear people talk. Where are they coming from? And that's one of the reasons I didn't want to make like tutorials on how to do comics yet, because I'm not good enough and I feel like I need experience. So I'm not just one of these people who like, maybe if all I did was draw from reference and then I'm telling people like, oh, and this will help you draw from imagination. And it's like, does it help you draw from imagination? Or are you just saying this? Because I've seen people who just say it. It's like, okay, try drawing from imagination. No, can't draw it. But it's like, well, but they're good at drawing illustration stuff from reference, so they must know what they're talking about. It's like, really though? Must they? It's kind of like, well, this person's an athlete and they play baseball, and and I want to play football, so they must know how to help me, right? It's like, well, maybe they'd have some advice, but not entirely. Like, anyway. Okay. Echoberry says, I just like making images I want to see. That's very good. Luckily, I've managed to keep that even through anxious art study grind phases. Good. Now it's one of the few incomes I have and remains fun. Yeah, so that's also what's really good, is that you do what you like, so that if you ever do become successful, like if you become successful for doing something a lot, then make sure that thing that you do a lot is something you like, because otherwise you might be very skilled in doing something you don't like, but people are willing to pay you for it because you're good at it, and you're good at it because you did it a lot. And the thing is, sometimes getting a job is like what people really want. Like, I just want to get a job. I just want to get a job. I just want to make some money. But the problem is, as soon as you start making money, the dynamic shifts. So, for instance, let's say you start making enough money. Let's say you live with your parents, right? Okay. And you have plenty of time to experiment and explore and do different things. But you kind of don't like living with your parents. You want to live on your own. All right. And then you do stuff that it makes you enough money to live on your own. But maybe it's not exactly what you wanted to do, but you're just happy to have a job. Hey, I'm working. I've got a job now. But now you also have, because you moved out, you have to pay rent. Or maybe you bought a place and you have to pay for a mortgage. Now you have to do stuff. Not because you want to, but because you have to pay those bills. And so it's a trap in a way, right? Like you kind of trapped yourself into a position where you didn't think enough about what you wanted to do. You just wanted to be successful, but then like as in get hired or make money. Okay, but now you're making money, but you're not necessarily doing what you wanted. Eventually that becomes heavier as time goes on. Like, the more you have to do what you don't want to do, there's two ways. I mean, sometimes it could become lighter if you come up with coping strategies, but in some cases it's actually worse. It becomes heavier, it becomes difficult to deal with. And had you, while you were still living with your parents, did more stuff that's like, you like it, but it doesn't necessarily sell because you're not good enough, but you do it enough that you get to the point, maybe it takes like a couple years extra, you get to the point where it does sell now because you just got so good at it, but now you get hired to do stuff you actually like, then your entire rest of your life is going to be different because now you're having fun, you're enjoying your life. I think for myself, I jumped too soon into getting work that allowed me to be independent, because I really valued independence, but then now it's hard because a lot of what I have to do to make money isn't stuff I necessarily want to do. It's just like, well, you have to do it. So I'm giving you warning from someone who's gone through it, or is currently going through it. Nigel says, drawing is one of the few things I'm naturally relatively good at, and I enjoy it. That's why I draw. Cool. That's fine, I guess. I mean, as long as you're not trying to... Yeah, that's fine. I think being predisposed to something, naturally relatively good at something, can be good, especially if you're at peace with that. Sometimes we're good at things that we don't necessarily want to be good at, but we're just like naturally good at it. Okay. Steely Bob asks, is this a Viking ship with a beaver as a front statue leading the way?
It's not a beaver. It's not a beaver. It's a marmot.
It's a marmot, but is it what's it called? A masthead?
Yeah.
Is it a
Yeah,
masthead
I-
or
I'm
is it
trying
a marmot that's
wooden.
alive? Is it wooden or is it?
I'm trying to make him wooden, but because I'm just going off like what I think a wooden ship is looking like, I obviously I'm getting it very wrong. So I'm just trying to figure it out.
All right. Beyond Lazy asks, is it normal for an artist to feel like Sisyphus when trying to improve an art? If you're trying to improve an art, yeah, very normal. If you're doing what you want to do, it's much less bad. So, if you're working on something that actually is what you want to do in the end, the problems never feel like you're just rolling the ball up a hill. It's more like you're rolling it somewhere, maybe even down a hill or on an even surface, or even sometimes it's up a hill, but it's not like permanently up. It's just kind of a bump. So everything feels like you're getting somewhere, because you are better than you were, right? You're not just like doing it for the sake of doing it. You're doing it for a specific reason. I think that changes everything, which is why I'm trying to encourage people to find what they want to do. And if sometimes we say we don't know what we want to do, but we do know what we want to do. It's just what we want to do sounds impossible. So for me, for instance, that would have been something like making a comic. Or right now, because I like making comics, but I would also like making video games or making films. I think film sounds impossible, so I don't do it. I think making a video game sounds also impossible, so I don't do it. But making a comic sounds possible. But that's my own self-imposed limitation. Like, that's something I still am dealing with, is that there might be someone who's like, making a video game doesn't sound impossible, like a Toby Fox, and then they do it, and they can do it, and then they have success. So yeah. Oh, sorry. I should let Decru ask the questions. Do you want to take over asking the questions, or Should I still?
Oh, it's
keep...
fine. I mean, I'm just getting some drawing in here. I mean, I thought we were just like looking more at what chat was saying, like in real time.
Yeah. We can do that. Okay, that's fine. All right. The conundrum, says Khalil, is I don't enjoy doing things wrong / incorrectly / not good enough. And if I jump into everything I want to learn about, that'll happen. I know this is a bad mindset, but that's how I think. Yeah. You really have to get over this because doing things wrong and incorrectly is precisely how you learn. Failure is the teacher. Success is not the teacher. Failure is the teacher. Success is like the fans who say like, hey, great job. But failure is the one who actually is like, hey, I'm going to help you actually get better. So sometimes we can be motivated by success and driven by success. I know for myself I am. And so there is this desire to have success because it's like, well, if I'm successful, then I'll want to do this thing more. But all the lessons you get are from failures and fixing the failures. So it's something that if you expect too much too soon, this is a long journey. It's something that's hard to explain to people because a lot of times you'll hear people who have been successful, they'll tell you if they knew how hard it was to become successful when they started, they would never do it. It would just seem too difficult. And I've had that experience myself where I thought, like, I'm going to study for 2 years and then I'll be this good. And it might take like 10 years before I got as good as I would think I was going to get. But it's like, if you had told me, hey, it's going to take you 10 years, I would feel like, oh, that's too much time. I can't do it. But it's the same as like, let's say it takes 5 years to get decent at something. And you have an older person, maybe they're like 50. And then they're telling you, oh, I'm too old to take 5 years. I need to get better faster because I'm 50 and I've got a bunch of time to catch up. Or I need to catch up. So anyway, so they will tell you they need the shortcut. But then 5 years later, when they're 55, they're still not at the stage they want to be. As opposed to if they had just not looked for the shortcut and done it the slow way, yeah, it would have taken 5 years, but now you're 55 and you can do what you wanted to do. And so you don't have to have this lifetime regret of, I always loved drawing, but I was too old and so I never pursued it. You can have a different thing, which is that I started late when I was 50, and it took me 5 years, but now I'm 55 and I can finally do what I wanted to do. That's way cooler. And also people don't really care in the end. They'll look at your art and they don't know how old you are. So it's like, no, they'll just judge you for what you are. So I think it's really important to try, even though you might be afraid of failure. The best thing you can do for yourself really is to make failure your friend. If you can be friends with failure instead of failure being like this scary enemy that you never want to meet, make it like your buddy who you always want to spend time with because they teach you so much and you can have fun with it. It's like, oh, hey, I messed up. I wanted to do something that felt cool and this doesn't really feel cool. But like, how can I learn? What am I doing wrong? What are other people doing right? Find examples of like other people who did the thing correctly. And then look at what is the difference between what I did and what they did and learn from that. Let yourself grow from that. Okay. PCA says drawing boxes was useful for me and also helped with toys like tanks that help me with perspective. That's good. If it helps you, do it. I would definitely not encourage anyone to stop doing something that's helping them. For myself, I've seen a lot of cases where people they want to do organic things or like comics or something. They get told to draw boxes and it kind of like, it does help with perspective, but sometimes it can do more harm than good for certain people. But if you like doing hard surface design, boxes is very good because most of the things are built off boxes. So it's very useful, yeah, for things like tanks. That's really useful. Anything hard surface. Lunning Kingwist says, "Hey Sycra, what do you feel like your technically weakest points are right now in your art? Where do you want to improve, and what artists do you look up to that you would want to be technically like?" So storytelling is where I want to improve right now, and the artists I look up to are just manga artists. I like storytelling in manga more than I like storytelling in like other comics, so that's who I look up to. Also, your strongest points. My strongest points are probably expressions and faces. Just drawing faces and expressions, and a little bit value. I'm a lot better with value than I am with line, so a little bit value. Maya says, "I love art because I love visual symbolism, saying sentences without words." Yeah, that's very cool. It's cool because it can be in movies as well. Like visual symbolism is just a neat thing. Very interesting. Meow says, "Do you have any advice for learning to break things down for comic formats? That's been a big struggle for me, at least since, unlike normal compositions, it's harder to find resources." What do you mean by comic formats? Do you mean like web comics versus traditional printed comics? I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. Okay. Next. I think the chat's kind of starting to talk about like responding between itself, so don't need to really talk about that stuff. Ayaya says, "My main motivation is just that I enjoy drawing a lot and I want to draw cute and expressive supplies illustration of girls, like my favorite artists on Pixiv." Cute and expressive supplies illustration. Is that like stuff you put on stationery? I've not heard this term. Yeah. Tion Anima says, "What art goals do you have?" I guess we could go around and ask this so you guys can start. What art goals do you have? Let's start with Dekru.
I think for a long time for me, it was also the whole like, oh, I just want to draw things that are really impressive and stuff like that. But after thinking about it a decent amount, I think my goal is just like show the things that I can imagine to other people, I guess. I think that's probably my goal. I don't really necessarily mind if they look good or not. Mm-hmm. I mean, well, them looking good is definitely like a nice goal, but it's not like the main goal is not to like impress people, but more of just like showing what I'm thinking about and stuff.
Okay. Bob, what is your goal? What are your goals with art?
Right now, finishing up my projects.
You'll have to explain a little bit what projects means. Like,
now that you've teased it.
Yeah.
Huh?
I mean, you don't have to tell
some
what.
Ideas, some ideas for comics and other ideas for films.
I see.
Yeah, that's basically it.
I see. Like you're doing animated films, you mean? Like not with a traditional camera?
Yeah, animated films with animation.
Okay. Okay, Flavia, what are your goals, art goals?
Mm, that's 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 a
That's a
question.
little too much for me.
It's a little too much for me. I guess in the short term, there's always this or that goal. Like, oh, I wanna be able to um, deliver this message from my head to the canvas or panel or whatever I'm working on. But in the longer term, I think my goal with art has always been to externalize my emotions, so that I could either depict things that I don't want to just hold inside, or sort of face things that are traumatic, instead of having them be like inside my head. They can be outside my head and I can look them in the eye.
Okay, that's good. That's a good goal. Sam, what are your art goals?
Yeah, I guess at the moment it's just about having fun, but yeah, I guess the goals there are always shifting in a way. Like when I was starting out, I was like I wanted to be like good at something, like having a cool hobby that's not like playing video games or something all day long. So yeah, I started to do that, and yeah, when I was doing that, yeah, like on that way, I figured that I might want to impress others by being good. But yeah, at the moment, it's just like about yeah, having that free time, and yeah, just having fun with it.
Cool. All right. Gria asks, when you're drawing comics, how do you think of it? Like a director or sequential images or something? I've trouble visualizing things, and I want to know how different artists go about it. So I try to write it as a script first, and then interpret it as like a storyboard, I guess. And then with the comic aspect, it's how do you fit it on the page, but it's from that initial. Like I'm not visual as a person, so I think I don't think of things visually because I don't have a visual memory, or like I can't see things in my head, but I can write ideas, and then I can think in ideas. So what would convey this well? I can think in that term using a visual understanding. So, for instance, hey, panel one, we're in this we're on a new planet. Okay, so I can't imagine that in my head per se. But what I can think is that an establishing shot is a good way of introducing a new location, like the setting. So we should start with an establishing shot. Now, establishing shots tend to look good either in like a splash or like a widescreen format where we can see a lot. So sometimes you'll have like a big splash page that introduces the environment, or sometimes you'll have like a thinner panel that you get to see like a wide vista, especially if you're like far away. It's like a wide shot. So then I will think, okay, and then what are what's special about this planet? What's the sky looking like? What architecture, whatever it is. But it comes from the narrative of I need this is part of the story, and then conceptually what gets that idea across, and then breaking it down that way. For instance, if I'm introducing a character and they're very tall, it might benefit me to use a taller vertical panel so I can have their whole figure represented, maybe things around them to show the sense of scale of how tall they are, but to include their height in that, and then to accentuate it with the size of the panel. But as I said, I'm not great with storytelling. I'm still learning it. I would consider myself an amateur. So I don't think the solutions I come up with are necessarily the best. That's just how I think of it. Pancon Queso says, as far as I know, the only two ways to be rich drawing as of today is if you have a not safe for work Patreon or getting in a better career. Yeah, there's different ways. If you're good with, if your thing happens to be popular and you can understand how to sell a product, you can do pretty well. Okay. Unmodern Animations asks, is there a point you can get to where you are happy with everything you draw? I think 2 points. One is that you have a style that is achievable, where you just want to say certain things, and it happens to be that the things are, let's say for instance you wanted to do a very simple cartoony style, and it conveys everything you want. I think then you can be satisfied with what you draw and focus on the ideas more. However, the other side is that you've reached a point where you're satisfied, and so you kind of stop improving. Like, I think that's not necessarily a great thing, but I do think for some people there are those points, and for most people not really, because as you get better, your eyes improve. So when you start, let's say you could look at an image and see 3 things wrong with it, but as you get better, and you might think, once I am able to solve those 3 things, I'll be a good artist. But once you're good enough to solve those 3 things, your eye level has improved to the point that now you might see 30 things wrong with that. And so it's like, well, now what? Now you have to fix those 30 things. Oh, once I can solve those 30 things, then I'll be good. But by the time you're good enough to solve those 30 things, you now see 50 things that need fixing or whatever. So it just is a scale. Okay. Hey, it's your boy says, I remember hearing 2 state of minds when it comes to work. You work for your passion or you work in your passion. Yep. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I feel that way. I think I'm in the working for my passion right now. And then if one day I get lucky enough to work in my passion, that would be cool. But I do kind of feel like it is a bit of luck if you get to work in your passion. Because sometimes your passion is, like, let's say you love splash art for League of Legends. There is probably a high chance of you being able to work in your passion if you get good enough, right? Because it's already, there is a job there. But let's say your passion was to draw strawberry seeds. Might be harder to find a job drawing strawberry seeds.
That's oddly specific.
Anything we should know about that?
No. I just want, Tian Anima says, I just want to impress myself, which seems a lot harder. I think what's better than trying to impress yourself is trying to make yourself happy. Because sometimes you can draw things that aren't necessarily good, but they still make you happy. Impressing yourself is like, it's kind of, I don't mean it in a cruel way, but it tends to, these things just, now for me, they just tell me, like, when I read these, it's just like, I have low self-esteem. It's like, yes, because I do too, so I'm not judging as in this is bad. It just, that's what it feels like. It all becomes about a self-esteem thing. as opposed to actually drawing. Zamkowitz says, do you think your current mindset of prioritizing enjoyment/fun to improve efficiently is compatible with your older videos about iterative drawing, lots of repetition that's not always fun? I think it's compatible in that, so it's not, there are different kinds of fun. There's a fun that comes from doing the thing, and there's the fun that comes from the result of having done the thing. So, for instance, maybe an animator doesn't like drawing every single frame of the animation, but they really enjoy seeing the character move, right? So while I might not be having fun doing the individual drawings, it is satisfying and rewarding because I know the end result is I get to see the character move. So there's that kind of fun. So in that way, iterative drawing can be fun in the sense of like, I know I'm improving. But I would say I'm not 100% sold on a lot of my own ideas because they might have been important at that time, but they're not important to me now. So that happens throughout your art journey, is the things you need to focus on in the beginning are not necessarily the things you need to focus on in the same way at the end. Let's say you wanted to be a boxer, and the first thing you have to do is a lot of dodowaku. And so you're doing dodowaku, and then eventually you get to the point where that just becomes routine, but it's not hard to do. It's just like you have stamina. You can run for a long time. Yeah. New says, I find it nauseatingly boring to do figure drawing practice. I just can't do it without getting angry. Yeah, you probably shouldn't be doing it if it's just making you angry. First of all, do you need to do it? Like, you might, if you just want to draw cars, you don't necessarily need to do figure drawing. But if it's that, like, why are you getting angry? I think that's important to find why you're getting angry, because it might be that you should be doing it or you shouldn't, but it just, it could be beneficial or not, but it really depends. Echoberry says, I've really enjoyed getting into visual novels. I had the freedom art-wise, but the decoupling of art and story into an asset structure is easier for me. Cool. Fernando says, I know the feeling, Sycra. I'm doing furry art for the past 7 months and I hate it. In a week, so I decided to quit that and do what I love. But now I feel like I'm not good enough for it and I'm in the fundamental loop. Yeah. A lot of times you do things to make money and it's like, this gets me out of one problem, but into a new problem. Thomas Murphy says, I decided to do art because it's what I sucked the least at. Me too. I always barely drew, so yeah, I wasn't super good at it. I'm doing a master's in animation at the moment, so yeah, we are getting there. Yeah, so I think when you do something because it's what you suck the least at, it is somewhat problematic, but it's also usually, you can flip it the other way as well, which is that, is it called Anhedonia when you don't feel pleasure or joy?
Yeah.
So I suffer from Anhedonia. So I don't necessarily feel pleasure or joy doing stuff. But what I do have is varying degrees of things suck. Like, it could be things suck less or things suck more. And what I've learned to do is sort of adjust my scale. So in the place, if things suck less, it means I like it. And if things suck more, it means I don't like it. So within that reframed thing, I can say what I like and what I don't like. Like, oh, I like this, or I must like this, and I'm just not able to feel it. But I must like it because I can do it, whereas I can't do other things. And framing it as something you actually like or want to do can be a lot more healthy than just thinking like, this is the thing I'm the least bad at. I think of it as, I don't really like most things, but I'm able to do this thing. There must be a reason. This must be really important. Because even with all the feelings of like not liking stuff, I still get something less bad with this. So I guess it's like a mental trick. Okay. New says, I find the only two reasons people don't do things they love to do is one, they don't know where to start, or two, they are afraid of failing. I think there are other reasons why people don't do things they love to do. Like, they don't have the time, they don't have the energy, they don't have usually time or energy. Maybe it's money as well. Like, they don't have the opportunity to do that. Sometimes people have kids and then they just get a lot of extra responsibilities that they can't really do things they wanted to do before. Just, I mean, it's understandable. Tank says, my only regret in my art career is not learning how to be a carpenter on the side. That's fair. That is wise. Yeah. Sometimes an art career is the worst thing for being an artist. Like, it's why, like, people would tell me, if you want to make money, don't do art. And I never cared about money. So for me, it was fine. It was like, okay, I'm not gonna worry about making money. So I'm not gonna, it's fine. Like, I can do art because I'm not worried about making money. But the problem is, if you do make money with art, that becomes its own thing. Because then you have to keep doing what you do. And once you start making money with art, the most important thing I think to understand is you are not doing art, you're doing business. It happens to be that the product you're selling is art. It's different. It's like, how do you grow a business? Well, you have to have marketing. You have to have a good product that people want. You have to make sure the customer is happy. You have to make sure the customer knows what they're getting. And what that means are things like, you have to be consistent. And being consistent often means you don't get to experiment too much. Like, if you experiment, it might be a bad business decision. So it's tricky. And then it's kind of like, for a lot of artists, they're far from business in the beginning. Like, that's why they like art. It's like, well, I like doing creative things. I like doing imaginative things. I'm not really into business and that side of it. I just want to create worlds that are fantastical or something like this. And then understanding that it's a business is like, oh, well, I wouldn't have done it if I knew it was a business. But when you want to make a living doing art, it's a business. And even if you work for other people, it's a different kind of thing that you have to consider. Like, you have to be able to work in a group. So social skills become important. And it's another thing a lot of artists suffer from, because they did art because they were the quiet kid in the back of the room who didn't really socialize too much. It's not always the case. Sometimes they're the person who's very social and shows their art, and that's part of it. But a lot of times you get like the quiet kid, and that's why they're doing art. Whereas if you work in a studio, it's not just about you, it's about getting along with people. And so social things come into play. Barry Ryan asks, how do you approach using references in your artwork? And how do you balance accuracy with creative interpretation? The thing I tell myself is that it doesn't have to be accurate. It needs to be readable. It needs to be believable. Things like that. So if I'm drawing metal, for instance, it doesn't have to perfectly reflect the environment within it. So I don't need to use like super high level fundamentals. I don't need to, for instance, Scott Robertson's actually able to, like, he has the knowledge to reflect the environment within the thing. It's like, okay, that's really impressive. But I don't need that. I just need it to look shiny. I just need it to look like metal. So how do I accomplish that? Well, it's a different thing to only have to worry about it just needs to look like metal. And a lot of reference things are just that. Like, it just has to look okay. It doesn't have to look perfect. And so a lot of things become like how do I, like for these helmets, for instance, let's say I wanted to make these helmets look metallic. It might be something like make sure there's a lot of contrast between light and dark, and the indications of like reflected light and stuff might be important, and then strong highlights and things. Like, okay, so by incorporating certain things, I can make it look like metal. And when I use reference, what I'm looking at is what are the things that make this look like the thing it looks like. Like, what is horse? You know, what is cloth? And I'm looking at those things. What is belt buckle? Why does this look like belt buckle and that does not look like belt buckle? So things like that. Anyway, okay. Khalil says, when you work for other people, you become the product because you're selling your own labor, so you have to advertise yourself. Yeah, true. And it really helps when you work for other people to depersonalize everything. So it's also, this is one of the hardest things. I didn't think about this as a topic before, but one of the hardest things about being an artist and being successful is so many things that are required for success are like the opposite of what artists bring, like their natural tool set. So consistency is really important, but artists like to experiment. They like to go, you know, for the most part, they like to push boundaries. Selling yourself, it's like a lot of artists have low self-esteem. Viewing yourself as a product is very difficult. Or as what you do as a product, I should say it that way. And also depersonalizing yourself, because so much of art is like, this is coming from my soul. This is so important. This is so meaningful to me. And yet, to be successful as an artist in a commercial way, you have to not see yourself in that way and sort of see like, okay, why is my thing successful? Is it meeting trends? Like, am I lining up with the right trend that happens to be popular right now? For instance, you might do fan art and you did a really good fan art of one image, but it's not really popular at the time and it doesn't get picked up by the algorithm. Or there's like a movie that just came out and you did fan art of that character, and because people are talking about it, you get boosted by the algorithm, and now maybe the work isn't even as good as the other one, but it will get a lot more views. So it becomes about different things. And some people have managed to see the game in business. Like, I guess, Dekru, I can call you out. Can I call you out?
Sure.
You see the marketing as a game, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like, it's very interesting. Like, I think almost anything can be seen as a game. I think the issue is that you have to think about how video games work, how everything is like a small step and everything gives you like sort of like a dopamine hit.
Mm-hmm.
And what you need to do really is just look at what are the things that are your objectives and sort of make a framework for yourself where it can work out, where everything that you're doing is sort of like feeling like gaining levels or gaining knowledge, like as if you were playing a game. It's not the easiest thing to do, but if you actually can figure out something, like can figure out more or less how your own brain works, I think you can actually make it so that the boring stuff actually becomes less boring, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like a life hack, kind of.
Yeah, it is. It's sort of interesting. I've been watching a lot of like basically like psychology stuff, and yeah, so it's like you have to think of your brain as like the human brain is just like sort of like adapted for, you know, thousands of years ago, like hunter-gatherer sort of societies. And like it's not very adjusted to a lot of modern things. And there's a reason why big companies like Facebook or TikTok or whatever, they spend so much money like trying to research what works best. Is like, well, all they're doing is trying to hack your brain so that you do what they want. So, you know, you can also figure that out for yourself and take advantage of that for yourself too, if you can like sort of research it a little bit, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of like marketing things are quite creative and impressive in a way. Like sometimes I think of something that's like terrible, but like, oh, this is stealing all your information, or like I'll hear a story about something and it's really bad, but at the same time a part of me is like, but that's sort of evil genius level bad. Like it's bad, but I can almost be impressed, or I am sort of impressed in a way by just how like, oh, you're able to use people's psychology against them, huh? That's, I don't know if that makes me a bad person for being able to be impressed by it, but it's kind of like with Mad Men, the marketing, like, oh, the decisions they make are still pretty impressive because it comes from a brain, it comes from some creative problem solving, and I think that is something we can appreciate. Cool. Okay. Aya says, I feel like I'm getting pretty good at drawing figures after laying down construction, but I just can't doodle for the life of me. How can I learn to draw without requiring a rough sketch every time? One way is time. Like, the more you do, eventually you'll build the muscle memory that you can kind of do it without using guidelines. Usually that just comes naturally, where you start to realize, like, wait, I don't need to do that. You can test it. Like, do I need to put all this information down? But I would say another thing is not to necessarily force yourself to, like, don't expect that you should have to not use guidelines if that works for you. A lot of my things were considering certain things other people did. Like, it felt like being good meant certain things. So, for instance, I'm much better at seeing value than color. And there's a certain stage where when you get good enough, you skip value and you go straight to color. And I did kind of get to a point where I could skip value and go to color. And I was able to get more nuance with my color, and I thought that worked. But I found that my overall results suffered, and that when I went starting from value, for me personally, it just worked better. So then I switched back to what works better for me because it works better for me. Like, it's just, in the end, do I want a better result, or do I want to brag about how cool I am? Like, is it more important to me that people are impressed by me as a person, or that they're impressed by the work I've done? And for myself, the answer was, I want them to be impressed by the work. And then, is the work going to be better if I've got certain natural advantages in certain things, or it's easier for me to do certain things? It's probably better that I keep doing those. Like, if I really felt like going straight to color was better, I would do that. But I feel like there's no point judging yourself or stopping yourself from doing what works for you just because someone else might find it not impressive. Like, comics are something, and caricatures and things like this, cartoony stuff, is something that automatically kind of will get you less, like, people be less impressed because it looks less impressive to the general public than something extremely realistic with a lot of detail. So you could say, okay, am I going to switch to doing something realistic because that will get me more, I don't know, praise? Or am I going to make it so my motivation is what I like, what I think is fun? Because if you think about what you think is fun, then you can focus on other aspects. Like, you can find your satisfaction from personal enjoyment. You can find that feeling from something other than, oh, I am doing this because people think it's impressive. I think that's a really weak way of improving, is if you just follow what other people like. And I think unless you're extremely motivated by what other people think, it doesn't actually work. It just makes you sad in the long run. So, yeah. Okay, I think we have time for a couple more questions before the end. All right. Moolayan Studios asks, is that a book the beaver is holding, Saudomi? First of all, it's not a beaver, it's a marmot. And it is a book.
B-O-B.
Oh, Bob. All right. IAS says, the reason I started wondering about this is because I was playing games like Garlic Phone with people. Does anyone know what that means? Garlic Phone?
I don't.
Okay. Realizing my practicing has not really paid off for that kind of setting at all somehow. Oh. I don't know what that is. But,
maybe it's one of those, like, guess your drawing games. Maybe it's like that.
Oh. I guess, if you have time, you could explain what Garlic Phone is, and then I can read the answer. Gartic? Oh, Gartic phone. What is Gartic phone? I don't know what, like, Gartic is even
Yeah, it's
more
even
confusing
more.
than Garlic.
Yeah.
Okay, Gartic phone is a multiplayer drawing game. Oh. Gartic phone, it's like a game of telephone. Ah. So, with drawings. I'll have to look it up because it's hard for me to conceptualize. I'll use Google later after the stream is over.
It's like there's a prompt and one person draws that prompt and the other people have to guess what it is without looking at the prompt, I guess.
Oh, okay. One person draws a prompt and the other people guess. Oh, okay. We had this game. It was called... what was it called? It was a game and you have to like draw and then people guess the drawings and it was popular. Jeez, I don't remember. It was a party game and it came in a box and you had a thing and you would draw and then you wipe the board. Anyway, sounds like that. I am both old and forgetful. Okay, let's see. Was it Taboo? Picturama? It was something with that sounded like Pictionary. That's it. Pictionary. It was Pictionary. That's the thing. Okay. It's free. You should do a stream playing it. We'll look it up and see if a Gartic phone is gonna be good stream content. Yes, Pictionary. You are correct. Okay. L3V says, "Hi Sycra, good to see you back on YouTube." Yep, I've been back for a little bit. I have been also active in our Discord group. So there's a Discord group that you can get to from either being a member in YouTube, like a channel member. It gets you access to the Discord group, but also going on Patreon. I think you just type my name, Sycra, in Patreon, and you should find my Patreon. And then we have voice chats, and I've been doing that a lot more. Like now it's like multiple times a week that I've been doing that, and that's fun because we get to meet other people, share art. It's just like it's kind of like the streams, but the topics are more like free flowing and don't have to worry about YouTube censorship, so you can do a lot more there. Get other questions answered, I guess. Okay. All right. Oh, I got a crown. Cool.
You did.
Let me wear my crown. There we go. Yay! I have a crown. All right. Cool. So let's wrap this up. Good work, everyone, on the images, and I'll go ahead and thank all my guests. So thanks Dekru, Bob, Flavia, and Sam. And thanks all of you for tuning in to another Sycra stream. And feel free in comments to write if you have questions of things you want us to answer in the next stream. Maybe we can like read the comments and see, okay, roughly what is a good topic? You know, what are people thinking about? What's important? Because I think we'll just do these so long as there are questions. If there's like a point where it just dries up and we've sort of answered everything, then I don't know that I'll just stream for the sake of streaming. But so long as people benefit and they get something out of the streams, we'll keep doing them. So yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for watching and take care. Bye.